Thank you all for joining us tonight, the night of the Shloshim for our father, my mother's husband, Rabbi Dr. Meilech DuBrow. This is a night to mark his Shloshim, 30 days since his passing, but really more to celebrate his life and begin creating the rest of his living legacy. We do have a couple of speakers tonight, so I want to get straight to it. For now, everybody is muted, and then at the end, we will definitely open it up to whomever would like to speak and like to share their memories or stories or things of inspiration that they've gained from my father throughout the years. For starters, you know, there's many people here from many different parts of my father's life, so kind of just to give a recap of the beginning of my father's life, and then you'll see as we get along, we'll hear from the different speakers. But my father was born in Los Angeles, California, in the Valley, as he fondly called himself, a Valley boy. He went to the university in San Diego, where he was a pre-med student, until eventually one day he heard about, he would give classes about, I believe from the Martin Buber book, about Hasidim and Chabad, until somebody came to him and said, that's not real Chabad. I met a real Chabad rabbi. And my father immediately drove up to UCLA. And there he met the real Chabad rabbis. He met Rabbi Kunin, he met Shtul, Rabbi Stillman. And that's when he began his journey in Chabad. Shortly after that, he was told that there's nothing more that Chabad in LA could do for him. And so they shipped him off to Hadar Torah in Crown Heights, where he spent a little under a year till he came back to California. And met my mother at UCLA, was hired by Rand Corp, which is a think tank, eventually made his way out to St. Louis, Missouri, or as we call it, Shana Louis, Missouri. And that's really where the story begins for many of us here on this call tonight. I would like to start off by introducing as our first guest speaker, Rabbi Benzion Friedman, who is a shliach of the Rebbe in Kansas City, in Overland Park, I believe, Kansas City. We met, I was just speaking to my mother about this tonight, and she was telling me the story that my father and mother had gone out there for medical reasons, and that's when they were introduced to the Friedmans, and the rest is history. Rabbi Friedman has a very special place in all of our hearts. The whole community out there does. So I would like to start off asking Rabbi Friedman to please kind of share with us your memories and your impression and what my father meant to the community out there, and really just anything else that you would like to share. I believe I did ask for, you're gonna have to unmute yourself, but I did ask to give you that permission. So Rabbi Friedman, when you're ready.
I think I'm unmuted, right?
Yes.
Can you hear me?
We can hear you.
I'm sorry I missed the beginning. I couldn't get on. I don't know why. So I hope I won't repeat anything that you've said. It's just interesting that the Shloshim is happening in Parshas Chayei Sarah. Parshas Chayei Sarah, one of the first Rashis in the Parsha, talks about Sarah, and it says Shnei Chayei Sarah. This is the years of the life of Sarah. So Rashi says Kulam Shavin L'Tova, that they were all wonderful, they were all good years. So you ask a question, what, they're all good years? She didn't have a baby for 90 years. She was taken away by King Pharaoh. She was taken away by King Avimelech. She had tzaras, a lot. And here you're saying they're all good years. So one of the explanations is, as we know, the famous story of Nachum Ish Gamzu, that what Nachum would always say, Gamzu L'Tova, means this is also good. Gamzu L'Tova, this is good. I think one of the, if we heard 1,000 times from Meilech, from Rabbi DuBrow, Gamzu L'Tova, that was his motto, that was his life, that's what he lived by. Gamzu L'Tova. So what, there were no bad times, there were no sad times in his life? Of course there were. But nevertheless, you ever see it on him? Ever a complaint? Gamzu L'Tova, that was his motto, that's what he lived by. Gamzu L'Tova, this is good. It's not going to be good, because they're different men. The story with Rabbi Akiva, as the Rebbe explains, things will be good. They're not good now, but they will be good. No. He believed like Nochia. I think he could have been named Nochem because he was the Gamzul Teva man. Whenever you heard it all the time, no matter what it was, Gamzul Teva, it's good. Everything is good. But I'm getting a little ahead of myself. I think our first beginning, we met Rabbi Meilech was when he came here. I think it was a Kinnis Shloshim in Kansas City, and they needed a driver, somebody to drive. So the shliach over there in Shana Lewis, as he would call it, you were right, Shana Lewis, that was at St. Louis. Shana Lewis. They drove him here. He drove him here to he was, young and probably smarter than some of the rabbis here, and therefore they felt a little bit, maybe uncomfortable with him. So he felt like an outsider. He wasn't one of the shluchim, and he felt a little outsider. So I spoke to him. We talked together and built up some, a friendship right then and there. After that, he would come. He would always come. It was definitely on Yontif, on Sukkot, Simchas Torah was a time that he always used to come to us. And I think he had more friends here. Okay, when he came on occasion, he had more friends here, I think, that he had in Shana Lewis. I'm not sure, but I think that's the case. Because over here, he had students and he had friends, long-lasting, friendships that lasted till the end. The friends that he made here in Kansas City. It came to a point that we would invite him here to speak, right? He came for Yontif, but then we'd invite him as a speaker for a Hanukkah thing, for this kind of thing. He'd come here and speak. And the interesting is that he can speak on any subject. You want to talk about herbs and spices and teas and health, he can talk about that. You want to talk about Kabbalah, you can talk about that. You want to talk about Chassidus, we can talk about that. You want to talk about the physiology of the body, he can, whatever it was, he can talk. And therefore he related to everyone. At the end, he'd ask questions, and it was an amazing, the get-togethers that we brought him out here. And this was probably when he started that was probably 25 years ago. But not only that, of course, I was close with him. My wife was close with his wife, but even the kids. I don't remember which one of the kids. I don't know if it was you or your sisters used to come in. They were friendly with our kids, right? And that friendship went on for a long time. So, like I was saying, this goes back 25 years or more. I remember he was here once for Simchas Torah, and we were collecting money. We wanted to make the Ata Haresa, where people donate money, you get a bracha. He says, let me do it. He's going to announce it. And he made a lot of money for us that year. He was great, like a what are these, announcers, the auction guys, auction. He says, you're going to give $1,800. You're going to get your name on the seat. We're going to have a special plaque with your name on the seat, on the chair. You'll have it was great. It was wonderful. So getting back to his learning, all right? The important part is there's a story that somebody came to one of the Rabbeim and said that I learned this and I learned that and I learned Tanya and I learned a whole lot. So the Rebbe asked him, you're telling me what you learned, but you're not telling me what the learning did to you. What did the Tanya do to you? With Meilech, that wasn't the case. What he learned, he lived by. It wasn't two separate things. He learned a lot, he knew a lot, and yet there was a different, what he learned, that's how he lived. It was, Emma's truth was part of him. And not only that, we're all familiar with the Yechidus that the Rebbe told him, right? It was on My Story. Everybody knows that. But an interesting thing is that he used it his whole life. And not only that, he taught it, right? This became part of his life. It's not just the teaching. I got a message from the Rebbe, how I should think, how I should do. This became his life. That became his thinking. Okay, and the Rebbe says, you learn Tanya, you'll be happy. So he learned the Tanya and he was happy. Gamzul Teva, this is also good. It's an amazing achievement, right? When somebody says, Trach gut wird sein gut, think good and it will be good. It's easier said than done, right? We like to wallow a little bit in our pain and our suffering, right? Not Melech, right? He lived. So not only, the word I want to say is, not only he learned the Tanya, not only did he learn Kabbalah, but he lived Tanya and he lived the Kabbalah. What it says, that's what he lived. That's what he was for. I think in the olden days when he was in Shana Lewis, I think he had a pretty good job. I think he was an assessor. He used to assess properties. You know about that, Baruch? Yeah, you remember that?
Yeah, it was one of the things that he did was within real estate, an appraiser and an assessor.
An appraiser. He was an appraiser. And why did he leave it? What happened?
I don't know.
He didn't want. He wanted it to be involved in Torah and Chassidus and Kabbalah. That was his life, and helping people. So, and that's what he did, right? That's what he did. He wanted to help people with his classes, with his teachings, with all the writings that he has. I'm sure. I'm going to show you in a minute some of the things that he sent me. I'm sure there's a lot of things that people don't know about the writings that he did. There's another thing that he was great in, and that is his humility. Okay, he was a man. He was a genius. I think he had Poshet Begashmi, a big head, and he was Poshet a genius, right? He was a genius in on all aspects, in all parts of life, in Chassidus and Kabbalah, and right, definitely so. But when you say somebody is humble, it means that he has something to be arrogant about. He has something to show off, and yet he is humble about it. Somebody who doesn't know anything, you know what I mean? Has no money. He's not bragging about his money. You know why? Because he doesn't have any money. When somebody has money and he doesn't brag about the money, that's called humility. Somebody has seichel. Somebody has, you know what I mean, understanding, a vast degree of knowledge, and doesn't boast about it, doesn't push about it, doesn't let everybody know how smart he is. That's called humility. So sometimes it works for a person's benefit. Sometimes, you know what I mean, people don't know. And in his case, I think the humility, right? He didn't push his knowledge. He didn't push the books that he wrote. He didn't push because I'm writing it. Who am I? You know what I mean? A simple person. Why should I push my book? But on the other hand, when it came to Moshe, he wanted to become a rabbi, and this was not long ago, right? This was already in the later years. He wants to be asked to become a rabbi, right? Because he wants to know. He wants to know the halach. He wants to know what it is. So he learned with my son, right? He learned with Zalman in California. When it came to the questions, so the Rav, Rabbi Shachat, asked him some questions. He says, these are the questions you're asking? They're like simple questions. Let me ask the questions, and I'll give you the answers. I don't know if you know about it, Baruch. So they wrote up 100 questions and answers they wrote up, and they gave it to the Rabbi Shachat. And he says, you know what? This is unbelievable. I'm going to use this. When I'm going to do smicha. I'm going to have the kids, have the bachrim, or whoever's learning the smicha, the rabbis. They should answer these 100 questions. That's what Meilech was. By the way, I also asked him after he told me this, what he did with the 100 questions. I said, maybe we can do the same thing with Tanya. Write up 100 questions, and put the answers. Everything could be found in Tanya, because Tanya is the Torah Shabbat of Chassidus, right? That's the basis of Chassidus. So everything is found in Tanya. Everything is found in Tanya, and we discussed this many, many times. All the sources and everything that is found in Tanya. So I'm not sure he did it. I thought maybe he wants to be busy with something. Maybe he's not feeling so well. It was already but later. So I'm not sure if he did it. But I mean, that's the point where he could have done that, right? Read 100 questions and answers, everything found from the Tanya. Okay. I want to mention one thing. I'm putting together a booklet, right? I don't know if you can see this on the thing. It's called Who Knows 7, right? Is it the right way? Who Knows 7? So it's all about the number sevens, the spheres, right? So I asked him, how do you do the planets? Which planets fit into which sphere, right? There are 7 planets, 7 noticeable. This is the picture of the spheres of the planets. So which one is Chesed, which one is Gevurah, how does it fit? So when you ask Meilech something, you know what you get. You get a couple of pages. You don't just get one, a quick answer. You get a couple of pages. So here I have a bunch of pages. Oh, another thing that I have from it. So he gave me a whole thing here, and just a couple of points here. Number 1, he lists them according to the spheres, according to the Gra. Then the Ravid, the Kuzari, the Ramak, the Arizal, the Eitz Chaim, the Rambam, and then according to science. I mean, it's like all this, the 7 planets, how they fit. What's the closest to the Earth? What's closest to in order from the sun, and order of their size. All this information, and it's not that he found this in a book. He did this, he wrote it, he learned it, and he put it together. How do I know that? Because he has another one here, and he gave me some the categories of 7 spheres. Okay, he has all the 7 spheres, and then he has the letters, which letters fit to each sphere, which directions are each sphere. Let me just go through this quickly. Days of the week, the planets, according to the Gra, qualities like wisdom, wealth, seed, life, dominance, according to the spheres, organs of the body, the right ear, the left ear, the right eye, the colors, blue, black, red, yellow, upper lip, all the colors, how they fit into the spheres, the firmaments, the Vilon, the Rakia, the 7 skies, the seas, there are 7 seas, the 7 rivers, the 7 deserts, the colors, and here he writes DuBrow, which means that colors according to the Gra, there's a colors, he writes colors according to DuBrow. Where does he know that from? From the Ramak and from Hasidus. So I know he wrote this himself. This is not copied from, you know what I mean? He copied it from something. Then he has the physiological systems, the skeletal, the circulatory, the muscular, you know what I mean, the physical body, and then parts of the mouth, which he got from Ginsburg, the lower jaw, the upper lip. So my point is that when he learned something, when he knew something, he knew it, right? He studied it, he learned it. And I think that's the message we have to take from Meilech. He wanted something real practical. That there's so many people that learn Chassidus, right? They know it, they can quote it, but they don't live Chassidus. They don't really understand it. I'll give just one more thing and I'm done. And that is my wife, due to Meilech, she started studying the temperament theory. Temperament theories is there are 4 different categories, and each person falls into one of those 4 categories. It's an amazing thing. She helped hundreds and hundreds of people already with it. So when she said, and Meilech turned her on it. So yeah, this program, take a look at that. It's very good. You can learn from it. But then when she started asking questions, Meilech said, you know what? Why are you bothering with that? Why don't you go straight to Chassidus, to the spheres? It's much better. You'll find more about the people. It's more in depth. It's more in detail, and you'll pinpoint exactly how each person is according to the spheres. Which means he lived it. He understood it. He knew it. He understood it. So it's not just we learn something, and you know what I mean. It goes in one ear and out of the other, the outer ear, the other ear. He lived it, and this was true to his essence. Right? He was a man of truth, a man who, in depth, he knew a lot. And I would hope that his children, that they go and they spread Taka. Oh, by the way, I have one of his books that he put out. Again, you know, a Kabbalistic book that he translated into English. All the different mitzvahs, how they fit with different parts of the body. I'm sure Baruch he gave this out somewhere on some kind of. So an amazing Kabbalistic book. So this man was truly a genius, like I said, but with his humility, you know. Not everybody knows about it. And therefore, I would hope that they would publish his works, put them all together, and spread the works, and people should know what kind of truthful, emissary, humble, and brilliant person we had, and we'll be able to learn from him.
All right. Thank you so much, Rabbi Friedman. I really appreciate that. One of the themes of what's happened in the last month, from when going through Shiva up until now, especially in the week of Shiva, when we're hearing people, we're speaking to people are telling us what they knew about my father, and there's so many layers and levels of things that we've been unpacking, so many stories that we've been hearing, things that he did for people, things he taught people that I personally had never even heard. So it does not surprise me that he was having conversations with you about the spheres and the planets, and that he was helping you, and he did all this research. It does not surprise me at all. And it doesn't surprise, even more so, like you said, he was very humble in his humility, in the sense that he knew what he knew, and he knew how great what he knew was. But like you said, he didn't push it. So thank you for sharing that. I'm going to have to be reaching out to you because there's a lot to talk about there. So Bez Hashem will be in contact, but that's for another time. the next person I would like to call upon brings us back to Shana Lewis. As Rabbi Friedman mentioned, we would go oftentimes from Shana Lewis to Kansas City, to Overland Park, and we would go there for the Yom Tovim, but we had a good foundation also in Shana Lewis, a good core group of people. And one of the things that was common with my father was, anywhere he went, though he was not officially appointed a shliach, he really did believe that anywhere he went, he was a shliach. Even though he didn't have the title, didn't matter. He was going to do what the Rebbe wanted. He was going to do what God wanted, and he was going to do what he felt was his mission, his purpose in life, which was to live a Torah true life and to help others live their purpose in a way that was based off of Torah values. So in Shana Lewis, we did as a family, and growing up being able to see that was incredible. There was a lot of work that we did with the community and people in the community, even though we weren't officially shluchim. But it was important to my father that people have access to Torah and the great wealth of knowledge there. One of those people who, I don't remember when we were introduced to him. I just remember that we met him because he was studying law at WashU. And I guess he'll tell the story of how he got introduced. But Shaya Rochester, as a Shaya, you will have to correct me if I get your title wrong. I'm just going to call you a lawyer because that's what I remember. So please give yourself the proper title when it's your turn. But I remember growing up, I remember seeing Shaya there by our Sadarim, by the Sukkot meals. He was ever present, and he was somebody who my father loved, admired. He had held and still does, held a very important place in my father's heart. For the last 6 years, I've been living in Crown Heights, and Shaya and his family have been out there for longer than that. And when we first moved, after I got married, my father said, "When are you getting in touch with Shaya?" And we were very fortunate that Shaya and his family hosted us for many Shabbos meals. So enough for me. At this time, I would like to turn it over to Shaya to speak about his relationship, what he got with my father, and then what they did together in Shana Lewis.
Thanks, Baruch. I hope everyone can hear me okay. I got a note that said that my internet was not stable, so hopefully I'm coming through okay.
So far, so good.
Okay, Baruch Hashem. So yeah, Meilech and I met in Shana Lewis in my first year of law school, which was more than 20 years ago. And when we met, I was a new Bal Tshuva, meaning I had just really become observant only a few years earlier when I was in college. And as a result, it was a very, sort of critical, formative time. And Meilech and Yehudis and the whole family really took me under their wing and provided me with immense support and guidance and mentorship during that really critical time. Meilech and I became close friends, and we spent countless hours together learning, almost always Hasidus together. And even though this was more than 20 years ago, I can say that even having lived in Crown Heights for the last, whatever it is, 18 years, I've met few people who care and think as deeply about Hasidus as Meilech. But tonight, I don't want to focus as much on Meilech's learning, his intellectual capacity, which were immense, because as Rabbi Friedman noted, as much as Meilech cared about thinking and learning, and there's no doubt it meant everything to him, he was equally committed to action. So I want to just share one story that I think illustrates Meilech and illustrates his dedication to implementing everything he was thinking about, everything he was learning, but how he really implemented that B'Poel Maisa, that he implemented it, effectuated it in his action. So in law school, I had started sort of a, whatever you want to call it, a mini Chabad house of sorts for other law school students and graduate students at the university. And one year, I don't know when it was exactly, but in the weeks leading up to Pesach, Meilech somehow got in his head that we must do a big Seder. We have to do a Seder for all the students. invite as many people as possible. We're going to do a big Seder. And frankly, I wasn't sure about it. It would be a huge undertaking in terms of time and effort and expense, and I just didn't think it would be a success. But Meilech, who everyone who knew Meilech could be stubborn, just would not relent and insisted that we go forward and we do this Seder. So I agreed reluctantly and started inviting students. And to my pleasant surprise, dozens and dozens of students accepted the invitation happily and were very interested. I don't remember the exact number, but we had at least 30 to 40 guests that came to that Seder table, which was a big number. So in preparation for the Seder, Meilech and I spent an inordinate amount of time choreographing exactly who would say what and when, and really just having this perfectly orchestrated Seder, and it would be run perfectly. And we were very excited. So come the Seder night, we had Baruch Hashem, we had the huge turnout that we expected. Things were going great. But as the evening wore on, even though we had carefully choreographed everything that we were going to say, Meilech, couldn't help himself, and he started to go into very deep concepts of Kabbalah and Chassidus. And honestly, I wasn't sure how it was going to play with the audience. But what was the point that I think is important is he did it with his usual brilliance, his precision, and maybe most importantly, with his good humor. And the students loved it. The students loved it. I will say that it was probably the longest Seder that I had ever attended, and it certainly was the longest Seder that our guests had attended. But it was also undoubtedly one of the most memorable Seders that any of us had ever experienced or will experience. So to me, that story illustrates so many of Meilech's qualities. It demonstrates his determination to put ideas into action, his stubbornness, but for good things, his organizational skills, but also his tendency to go off script at times, his brilliance, and also his ability to have a good time, his ability to take lofty concepts, but put them into terms that anyone can understand. And maybe most importantly, it demonstrated his love for his fellow Jew. It was a beautiful evening that I will never forget. As Baruch said, Meilech and the family, they were not official shluchim of the Rebbe, but they did shluchas, and Meilech did shluchas. And he recognized and he taught me and he taught others and everyone around him that a person can and should spread Torah and mitzvahs wherever you are and at all times. So I guess just to conclude, as I said, when I met Meilech first, it really was at a critical juncture in my life. I was new to Yiddishkeit. I was just out of yeshiva. I was in the world, out of yeshiva for the first time. And I could have gone down many different paths, some clearly better than others. But due to and through Meilech's mentorship, he helped guide me to make sure I stayed on the proper path. And that is a debt that I can never repay. So Meilech, I will miss you always, but I also tried to the best of my ability to live my life as you lived yours. Thank you.
Thank you, Shaya. Greatly appreciate that, and a lot of beautiful thoughts there, and stories and different aspects of the stories that I semi-remember, but hearing new details. You're going to have to, another time, you're going to have to tell the Meilech story with Mendel. That's a great story. But that was one of those things, like you said, my father was very much, when I was having a discussion with him not too long ago about coaching, because I've been in coaching now for 6-7 years, and there was something he'd been doing for a while as well, and we'd like to talk about it, and we'd like to butt heads about it as well, because I tended to lean more towards outside thinking and attach Torah to it, where he was always, like Rabbi Friedman said, why go there when you have Torah? So we were speaking recently about the idea of coaching and where it comes from, and coaching from a Torah perspective. And I just completely lost my train of thought. Choo-choo. So moving right along. I'll come back to it when I remember. I guess oh, that's what it was. He always liked, he always had a partner in crime, so to speak, my father. There's always somebody that he was doing something with. And it always had to be for the right reasons. And again, Torah true. So as we moved to Shana Lewis, I was only 1.5 at the time, or 1 year old. He took on his shlichus there, or he did shlichus there, and he found his people that he worked with, and then going back and forth between the Shana Lewis and, Kansas City and back. And then eventually when I was, I believe, 12 years old, we moved back to Los Angeles. And it took a while to find the right place, but eventually my father found himself at the Chabad Israel Center, which it started off as he was the old curmudgeon at the young Israeli Minyan, which he fondly accepted that title. But then he found his place with the main Minyan. And once again, he found himself in a position where, I don't know if he found himself or he created this position for himself, where he was hand in hand, arm in arm, helping out the Chabad to learn and to grow and develop and become more. My father was very passionate about fulfilling your purpose, whether as an individual or as an organization. So for our last official speaker, and then we will open it up to everybody, I would like to call upon Rabbi Asher Mendy Yemini, who is the rabbi, or one of the rabbis, at the Chabad Israel Center in Los Angeles, California, a place that was very near and dear to my father in the later years of his life, and a place where he invested a lot of time and energy into. So Rabbi Asher Mendy, if you could share with us for a couple minutes, please.
Am I live? I don't know.
Yes, you are live.
I listened to Rabbi Friedman. I listened to the other friend of DuBrow, and I think to myself, in the story of Meilech, there's ein mukdam u'muchar. There's no end and no beginning. People talk about when they first met the DuBrow family. I don't remember when I first met the DuBrow family, but I know it was on Crest or Durango. We were in carpool for many, many years. I don't know if Ramy remembers, but I think there's a hole in the garage somewhere on Cascio. But I was honored the last few years to be able to, last 5-6 years, to be able to sit with Meilech and learn from him. And he helped me tremendously in many different ways, whether it was fundraising. And as Rabbi Friedman said, he just, he would tell me, how much do you want to fundraise? And then he would ask my father. My father would double it, and Meilech would get it done. And he wanted to. He was part of security, and then he was helping with the newsletters, and he was helping with speeches. He would tell me, if you need to give a drush, if you need me to give a drush, just give me some notice. And then when I would come to him, he would tell me, why are you coming now? Why didn't you come an hour ago? But then he would give a half-hour speech, and somehow it was always relevant to the parsha, and it was always relevant to his personal life, and he always connected with everyone every time he spoke. And I think within him, he always loved to give, and he loved to be able to give, and he really helped support our community here in Los Angeles tremendously, and he'll be missed. One of the things that in this week's parsha that connects to the Meilech, and it's mentioned before, is the concept of shlichus. We learned about shlichus in this week's parsha. Avram Avinu sent his servant Eliezer to go and to find a wife for his son Yitzchak. And Avram Avinu made him his shliach. And the question is asked, why is it that Eliezer's name is not mentioned anywhere? Why is Eliezer's name not mentioned anywhere? Even though We learned so much from the story. We learned so much about his prayer, his davening to Hashem, and how Hashem answered him before he even finished davening, and as opposed to Moshe Rabbeinu, and as opposed to Shlomo Melech, and how he's connected, but yet his name is not mentioned really in most places. His name is mentioned 1 or 2 times in the entire Torah, but not in this story. His name is not mentioned, and that is because a shliach is iber gegeben. He's given over to his mishaleach, and the Melech, Rabbi Meilech, Dr. Meilech was definitely a shliach, and he did his utmost to help his community, and he helped the people around him, and to inspire other people, and to learn with them, and to bring them into the fold. And just in my experience with the Melech, how he inspired people to get married, kedas b'din, and to keep Torah mitzvahs, and he's definitely a shliach of the Rebbe. And I hope he's going to be a good to better for all Klal Yisrael, and we'll see him soon with Mashiach Tzidkenu. I asked my father, I said, how can we sum up Rabbi Meilech in a few words? And he said, Baruch Ha'emer V'Oiseh. Rabbi Meilech, you say it, and he would do his best to get it done, and he would do his best to transform. So may he be a good to better. And I want to also bless Mrs. DuBrow and Shoshi DuBrow and Chayasara Liana DuBrow and Baruch Noam DuBrow and Ramy DuBrow. You should have success and health and happiness within everything that you do, and be a good beacon of your father to your communities and your life. Yeah.
Amen. Thank you very much, Rabbi. People spend their entire life trying to find the right place, the place that's going to be their forever home, so to speak, or the place that they're going to land and establish themselves. I don't know that my father ever really found that one place. We did travel a lot, and he especially traveled a lot, and he loved traveling, but there's no question that when it came to the last, I don't know how many years, when we were in Los Angeles, that he was a part of the Chabad Israel Center and that whole community. I don't think it was even that long. I think this was probably within the last 6 years. One of my siblings will correct me if I'm wrong. There's no question that is definitely one of the places that had the biggest impact on him. Going back to what Rabbi Friedman mentioned at the beginning about this week's Parshas Chayesara, talks about Avram and Sarah and how they had, it says that they were both blessed. It says Avram he was blessed with all, and explains that the gematria, the numerical value of the Hebrew word of bakol, all, is referring to his son. And he and both Sarah, it says about her, in the list it says that she lived for 127 years, and these are the years of her life. And so what's the point of mentioning it twice? But either way, the point is the parsha talks heavily about how Avram and Sarah had such a great life. But when you look at the facts, where is that great life? The two things that God promised them, kids as numerous as the stars and the dust, and to have a land, those are two things that they never really got. It was only after all the trauma and all the trials and tribulations, and it was after Sarah passed away that, so Avram, they had a kid. They had one child, one son that they really loved. And they had one piece of land, the Maras HaMachpelah, the cave of the forefathers. How is this everything? So I was reading in an article by Rabbi Lord Jonathan Sachs, and he sums it up very beautifully, that God doesn't tell us and doesn't give us necessarily the ability, the chance to do everything we're meant to do. But he puts within us what we need to do, and we have to at least begin it. And that's what happened with Avram and Sarah, is they began what needed to be done. In many ways, this is thinking about the last month. My father was a man of many projects. He started many projects, and a lot of them were beginnings. They all came back to one thing, which was that idea of helping people to live a Torah true life. He got his smicha, his rabbinical ordination, a lot later on in life. He and I actually got it about a year apart. And then only recently, I believe in July, he got his PsyD, his doctorate in psychology, which was something that, again, the signs were there. He was pre-med, and now he got his doctorate in psychology, so a little bit different. But my father, he set the foundation for all of us, especially for his children. But it says, as an educator, I learned something called Kol Chinuch V'Hadracha, which is the ways of education and guidance. And one of the things it says there is that an educator is like a father, that when an educator educates somebody, is as if that person is their son or their daughter. Anybody who has had any chance to learn from my father, it is as if they are a quote unquote a child of my father, and they've gotten something from him. And we are now all tasked with continuing the legacy that my father has started to create with all that he's done. And at this time, I would like to call upon my brother Ramy to share his thoughts and then to talk about how we are going to be continuing that legacy that my father has started. It's not one that he left behind, it's one that he started, and a way for all of us to be a part of that and to contribute.
Okay, I guess in the spirit of everybody else, and I should probably do it this way. Can you hear me now? Yeah. Well, nowhere near as eloquently as what everybody else has been speaking about. Despite having pre-planned all this for days and speaking with my brother beforehand about, who's going to speak about what and make sure that we don't bore the audience. I'm going to stray from that for a minute just to kind of talk about a realization that I've had over the last few weeks. Obviously, everybody goes through probably different experiences when a loved one passes, but I think we all go through the same thing, which is really kind of unpacking and repositioning the experiences we had with them. One of the questions that I've been getting a lot from people is, some variation of, if you had to sum up your father in a sentence or an identity, what would it be? And for the longest time, I kind of struggled with, that's a horrible thing to ask a person. Don't ask me that, because he's not one thing. There is no one sentence that can define him, but it actually got me thinking, and hearing it tonight as well, I think that I'm really starting to believe that while that's the case, there is one sort of identity which you could attach to his involvement with other people. I don't know how puzzles are made. There's a lot in this world I don't know, and how puzzles are made is definitely at the top of that list. But I imagine that there's somebody who has to design the image, and then there's somebody who designs the cuts, and then it's up to each of us to rebuild it, to put the pieces of the puzzle together. And I started realizing, as I listened to people and think about my own experiences, that really who my father was is none of those three. He was the fourth, as I would create it, which is, if you don't know how to put the pieces back together, he'd show you based on your own skills and your own ability. If you're capable of putting together a 4,000 piece puzzle without any images, he'd be the one to flip all the puzzle pieces upside down to make it as hard as possible, so that you had to do it based on your abilities. If, like me in a lot of areas with my relationship with him, if you were basically like a 3-year-old incapable of building a puzzle, he would have to cut the board to the specific shape and let you put the piece in. He was very, very good, whether it was conscious or otherwise, at picking up on people's strengths and really pushing them and building a world for them, which, even if he wasn't the actual physical person, the one helping you put the physical piece where it belongs, it was because of what he set you up for. Like, one of the stories I tell a lot about my own childhood, there's defining moments in my life, and one of them was in yeshiva. I guess I was probably 18 at the time, 17 or 18. I was in yeshiva in Minnesota, and I was not happy. And I had an opportunity to go to LA and get an internship at Fox Studios, which was a dream of mine, to work in the movie business. And a friend of mine called me up and said, "Hey, there's this job, I can get you in." And of course, as an 18-year-old in yeshiva who's not happy, that sounded like the greatest thing in the world. So one of my friends at the time, a guy named Friedman, who's now a shliach in Calabasas and just one of my closest friends, he pulled me out of class one day, which I was the right hand of the Rosh Hashiva, and it wasn't because I was a great student. It was because that was his stronger hand. It was easier for him to give me a little wake up and listen if I was right next to him. So he pulled me out of class, which in and of itself wasn't an easy thing for someone to do in his position. He pulled me out of class to sit with his father, who was rarely in town, but when he was in town, it was a pleasure to speak with him. He drives me to his father's house. I sit down with his father, and before anything, his father says to me, "So you're thinking of leaving yeshiva?" And I said, "Oh, Eli spoke to you?" And he looks at me deadpan and says, "No, you're a bacher. Everyone wants to leave yeshiva. You're not special." And it was one of the most defining moments of my life, because it kind of struck me as, you're right. I'm not special. I shouldn't leave. I need to go through the process that I need to go through. And when it's the right time, then I'll go get that job at Fox if I want it, if it's available. In the meantime, go back to yeshiva, do your thing, and do the best you can. And I always credited Rabbi Friedman with that. But, as the years go by, I realized that if it weren't for my childhood, if it weren't for my father carving out that world for me, so to speak, carving out the board for me to put the puzzle pieces in, Rabbi Friedman giving me that puzzle piece would never have been something I would have been able to put into the actual correct spot, and it would not have created a full picture. And I hear people talking, and it sounds like that exact same thing. I mean, I don't want to assume anything here, but like the story that Shai that you just told about the Seder, he knew what you were capable of doing, whether it was conscious or not. He wasn't going to let you get away with just, all right, have 3 people at a Seder, it'll be nice. You got to have 150 people there. He really was very good at that. And there's a lot of stories that we could go into, which would really kind of be misunderstood if we don't understand that fact. And I realize that as I unpack all the feelings and emotions in history, both the good and the bad, and the perceived good and the perceived bad, which when put through a Gamzu Latova lens really does change to good. And I guess actually that kind of segues into what I'm supposed to be speaking about. One of the, just to get very personal for a moment, one of the biggest challenges that I've had with my father in my life was how hard he pushed me in my mission, my shlichus, which we don't know what it is, but with the skill sets and the passion that I've got, it's pretty obvious that it's just because I ignore them that I'm not actually doing what I'm supposed to be doing. But it's rare that a person is given, I think, such passion for something and also skill about it. A lot of people are passionate for sewing and they can't sew worth anything. And thank God I've got really some very strong passions and some skills in it. And one of those areas has been in, well, for lack of a better term, in entertainment. My father was an entertainer for sure, but really pushing that. And I would write screenplays that I would get just pats on the back from some incredible people, and my father would give it back to me all marked up and read with all the grammar mistakes. And it pushed me in that place where I'm like, all right, fine, I'm going to ignore the grammar for a moment, but now I'm going to go get this darn thing made. And I realized years later that, it was his way of connecting with me, but also it was him building that puzzle piece for me. It was really him saying, if you want to do this, you got to pay attention to even the littlest details. Like my brother said, my father was very, very, very good at starting projects, and he has just a treasure trove of projects that he started, and to some extent has been able to bring to the world in some form of publishing, like Rabbi Friedman showed the book. And there's a lot of other stuff which he didn't. My brother himself used to ask all the time for my father to write down stories, write down these amazing stories you tell everybody. And my father's response was always, you write them down. I think he was building the world for Baruch Noam and myself and my sisters to really help him take those stories to the next level so that he could focus on building this treasure trove of stories. It's our job to make sure that somebody stamps ink to paper and makes it happen. He was the one making sure the stories came out. Now it's our job to do that. And so what I'm going to take another couple minutes to really quickly talk about is the Karen that we're doing for our father. We're not trying to make this a fundraiser, but given the stories of that we've heard tonight, also, I think this will be my moment of standing up in front of the shul and asking, you want a plaque of your name on the chair? what is a Karen? I guess we'll start with that. So Karen, essentially, it's a gift or a fund that's set up in memory of the deceased. Very often it's the family donating a Sefer Torah or a set of books to the local shul. Some people set it up to help pay for these gifts, and some people help set it up to pay for funds if the family needs them to live off of. I'm sure we've all seen the just absolutely incredible stories that have come out of both the US and Israel of tragedies that happen in families and communities stepping up and really helping out. In our case, we're actually kind of hoping to do a little bit of both. We as a family are contributing funds in order to provide gifts, if you will, to the community. And we're also asking for the community to get help and involvement, because our goal, our mission, our vision of what we can do with our father's treasure trove of material, it requires a lot, and we really want to see it. We want to be able to use the fund to not only provide these commemorative gifts, but also to allow us to do projects which can really just build on his legacy. At some point in time, also maybe even provide extra parnasa to help replace the parnasa that my father brought in. So the way we kind of focus the Karen is on three of the areas of our father's life that we felt were the most important and memorable. As has been spoken about before, it was his love of Torah, absolutely. His focus on health, absolutely. And then his love and his reputation as a speaker and a storyteller and a teacher. So in order to do this, we've come up with a couple different ways that we can bring this out there. And so our Karen is actually, rather than just one thing, like we're going to donate a Sefer Torah to Shul A, or we're going to donate a light board or something, we're actually going to be doing 4 very specific causes. The first and the second, which are built specifically to commemorate our father's love of Torah. We're donating money to a Sefer Torah that is currently being written, and the donation is being done specifically for the donation of a particular pasuk in the Torah. The pasuk is Yaakov Halech B'Darkei, which is, as we've heard tonight, very much of what my father was about. Baruch can talk more about this specifically, but basically the idea of it wasn't just about learning and talking into God and being religious. It was also that Yaakov went on his way and he actually went out into the world. So we're specifically have chosen that pasuk to donate to this Torah being written. We're also going to be sponsoring up to 4 gartels, which are going to be used to bind the Torahs. And these are going to go specifically to shuls where his children, grandchildren go to shul, so that every time a Torah is used, his memory can be reignited, and the brachas that come along with it, the brachas that come along with it can hopefully reach Shemayim without any sort of barriers. The third thing, I guess technically that was the first and the second. The third thing we're doing is really to reflect my father's love of health and his passion for health. Shoshi's son Mookie at his yeshiva, they're grabbing onto this concept that it's important for Bachram to be healthy, so they're building a gym. So we're going to sponsor one of the pieces of gym equipment in our father's memory and in his in continuation of his passion for health, not only on a physical level, but also on a spiritual. And our father, as we all know, is very, very, very much believed that your physical health and your spiritual health are intertwined in a way that it's not changeable. So in order to continue this legacy, in order to commemorate this and support his love for this, we're going to provide a donation and sponsorship for one of the pieces of gym equipment at Mookie's the school. Mookie's in yeshiva now. The final one, which is it's a big, much more involved project, one that hopefully is going to grow over time and have a global impact, is the mission that we've taken on of turning our father's beloved stories and writings into comic books and novels and mediums that he has yet to have these stories out there. Any child who's ever sat at our father's table has seen 2 things. One of them is our father tells some incredible stories, and the second one is all of his children roll his eyes because we've heard these stories about 4,000 times. Yet they're not written anywhere. And even if they are, even if somebody wrote them down in a notebook somewhere, they're not really something that's ingestible by a child. They're not really something that children can look at and really truly get the excitement that that was told when my father tells the stories. I mean, I'm sure my brother does a good job, and with all due respect to him, he ain't my father. So there's just no way he could get the eye rolls that my father got, because the story was told so perfectly each and every time with the exact same gestures and the exact same intonation. And unfortunately, everyone else who hasn't already seen this isn't going to be able to do that. So we're really looking to kind of use a new medium to tell those stories with a new to a new audience. So the first project we're doing is we're actually going to take a bunch of his stories and turn them into comic books. Through my work, I'm very fortunate to be partnered with one of the top independent comic book producers and publishers, and they've agreed to help us. Not only are they going to take the stories that we're going to write down that my father told for years and have their professional artists and inkers actually draw them so that it really brings them to life in the way that my father would want, they're also going to help us physically publish them. But despite the fact that he's not Jewish, he loved the concept of what we're doing here, so he's actually agreed to do it at cost. So God willing, that means we'll be able to do a lot more than we initially were. The first plan is we're going to do the first book. We're going to do the first comic book with between 3 and 5 of the stories. And then we're going to print between 500 and 1,000 books, and we're going to give them out for free to between 500 and 1,000 kids at the schools where my father's children either currently teach or previously taught. 3 out of 4 of his kids taught in schools and are instrumental in that. And there are probably hundreds of kids who have learned and have just really grown because of those. And while I've never really worked in a school, I'm the guy who knows the comic book publisher. So the 4 of us together are going to be able to help these kids get the stories from our father. So how are we doing this? Like I mentioned, we're going to put some money in ourselves. We've also set up a GoFundMe page to raise the funds. The way the numbers are going to work, there's going to be a lot more information online shortly. Yesterday, GoFundMe seemed to think that it was time to freeze and technology shouldn't work for us. Today, it seems to work a lot better, so we've gotten it started up. But the hope is there'll be a lot more information on there. But the way it's going to work is donations can be made through the GoFundMe. If we reach our goal, we'll be able to do all four of these things. That we'll be able to donate for the Torah. We'll be able to donate the Gartels, we'll be able to donate the gym equipment, and we'll be able to produce at least 1,000 copies of a full comic book. The next steps, of course, if the books are well received, like we expect they will be, the goal is to actually produce more. There's just a plethora of stories that my father has, and we're not going to be able to fit them all into one book. So we're hoping to make more and more books. The books, the second series, third series, everything from there, the plan is actually, if it's received well, to actually sell them into stores and use the money that we can generate from that to produce even more and even more. And if they turn out to be really successful, then that would, God willing, be an additional source of parnasa that can help replace some of the parnasa that my father brought in before. If these all go really well, and if we start getting enough desire from older people as well, that they want to hear these stories and not in comic book form, then my brother is going to be tasked with turning these stories into a novel, and I'm going to be tasked with finding a way to keep on top of him without him starting to hate me. But we're going to then turn these into like actual novel form. My father did outline some, some stories that would be a great novel, and who knows, maybe one day we'll turn them into actual movies and TV shows, and thinking really large on that. But overall, the idea with the Karen is, rather than just provide a gift to a shul, rather than just do one thing, we really want to use that puzzle board, as it were, that my father set up, and then move the pieces as we can. Again, I don't want to turn this into a fundraiser, but of course, all the help that the community can provide in this is just greatly appreciated. We'll update the GoFundMe as well as everybody else. I guess we can send out the link. I'm not sure if we can do it through here or we'll do it on the same venues as before. And we'll get more information. We'll keep it updated, keep everyone updated on that. And God willing, God willing, very, very soon we'll be able to see these comic books in the hands of thousands of kids and these stories just spreading across the world. So again, just a massive thank you to everybody for coming. I'm blown away. It's really surreal to me to see so many people so late at night, really just so dedicated to this, and I really very much appreciate it. So thank you.
Thank you, Ramy. Really appreciate that, and thanks for the compliments, on the backhanded compliments. I'll get you back for it. I think we're coming over Friday night. So in typical DuBrow fashion, and like Shaya referenced with the Pesach Seder, we had initially set 30 minutes for official speakers, and we've now hit the hour mark. So I do want to open it up to everybody. So I'm going to, before I do that, I promise this is the last thing, just really quickly, there's a couple things that we want to do to continue my father's living legacy. And one of those things is as follows. If I can get my computer to work, you'd think 1.5 years of teaching in the pandemic would have taught me how to use. There we go. Okay. So to continue the legacy, like my brother mentioned, there's the Karen, there's the gift, which as we see it, it really is a living legacy. It's continuing all that my father did and that he loved doing. And then the other thing is we would love to have you guys and girls and ladies and gentlemen, we would love to have everybody contribute their memories and their stories. So we've created a email address. It's memories4Meilech, the number 4Meilech @gmail.com. And I will put this in the chat as well. If you can send us just anything in writing, stories that you remember, excuse me. If you want to record a video of yourself speaking, if you want to send some photos, the idea is that it's always good for us to see them. Plus, we want to be able to share them. And then again, we've got a 1-year plan, we've got a 5-year plan, 10-year plan, and then we've got the rest of our lives to continue building my father's legacy. And his stories were something that he loved doing, and his stories are what keep us going as well. So again, it's memories4Meilech @gmail.com. If you could send anything, and it doesn't have to be tonight. Like you have the next year and 5 years to do that. And then the last thing, as Rabbi Friedman mentioned, my father did write multiple books. And these are just a couple that you can read his thoughts and his learning and how he applied his learning. You can find more of his stuff at 5gates.org, kosherhealthfitness.com, and Rabbi Meilech DuBrow.ghost.io. And again, we'll send all these out in the regular medium. At this time, I do want to open it up to anybody else who would like to share. It is still recording. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to give everybody permission to unmute themselves, which has been done. So don't wait, because everybody's going to wait. So if somebody started off, we'd love to hear from you. Anybody who cannot stick around, thank you so much for joining us. We're here anywhere from 8:45 at night to almost, I think, beyond midnight, and it's also the night of the Kinnis. So thank you for showing up, for sharing, for hearing, and this is the beginning of the rest of my father's life. He may no longer be here physically, but he's most definitely here spiritually. He's most definitely watching us, and I know he's going to get immense amount of nachas and joy from hearing from everybody. So for those of you who would like to, the floor is now open. Listen, I spent 1.5 years teaching on Zoom. Don't wait for somebody else to start. So just jump in. Otherwise, I'm going to start picking people. I'm going to point, and you won't see how I point to. So if you want to share, please.
Well, I'll just say one thing. It's really an honor to him and to your mom that you kids are so wonderful. So I think that speaks to how good a person your father was and how good a teacher. And it's very nice.
Thank you, Uncle Larry. Good seeing you guys. Thank you for joining us.
Also, I'll say, you have put so much thought, all of you, into how to keep his memory alive and his legacy and continue with such beautiful, thoughtful ways of doing it. And that's really a beautiful tribute. It shows how you feel about him, and it's a huge honor. And I'm sure your mom is getting a lot of nachas from that.
There's Marie from St. Louis.
Yeah. She.
I just want to also thank everybody.